Shall we crash onwards then to Mank?
Indeed, and find out whether this is also terrible or not. Okay, Mank is... What?
Fuds on film. Are these films terrible or not? Those are our metrics. On a sliding scale of 0 to 1.
Okay, have you noticed the year we're having?
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Mank is, surprisingly, David Fincher's first film since 2014's Gone Girl. So, being a big fan of the director, please check out our episode on Fincher from February 2017 for more. I was, well, quite frankly, massively excited by the prospect of Mank. Something compounded by its subject, the writer and writing of Citizen Kane, a film that was, in fact, the very first that we ever spoke about here in Fuds on Film, and which Scott and I testified then to being huge lovers of. Gary Oldman plays Herman J. Mankiewicz, the titular Mank, though sadly in the UK that name's a bit too close for comfort to the dirty and unpleasant Manky, and I could never get that out of my mind. A washed-up screenwriter employed by RKO Pictures to write the first draft of a screenplay for Orson Welles' new film, then titled American. The story of the writing of Citizen Kane has been studied and argued over for decades. So to say this is any sort of definitive portrayal of events would be foolish. It's pure Hollywood, so, as the French say, c'est des conneries. Mankiewicz seemed to have been as unreliable a narrator in real life as he is in this film, perhaps thanks to his alcoholism. The 62-year-old Oldman playing the 43-year-old Mankiewicz works. He's really got some city miles on him. So we can't take too much on faith, as a bedridden Mank guides us through flashbacks to meetings with Louis B. Mayer, William Randolph Hearst, Hearst's paramour, Marion Davis, Amanda Seyfried in what is probably the film's standout performance, and boy wonder Irving Thalberg, often against the backdrop of the 1934 California gubernatorial election, in which Mayer and Hearst worked together to torpedo the campaign of Upton Sinclair, much to Mankiewicz's distaste. These serve to attempt to explain their analogues in Citizen Kane and the reason for their inclusion. Conspicuous by his absence for most of the film is Wells, played by Tom Burke, who appears only fleetingly, more to give Mank a kick up the bum than anything else. He's heard more than seen actually, and Burke deserves lots of credit for how uncannily accurate his Wells voice is. There's actually a whole mess of accents going on in here, several bad unfortunately, with special anti-plaudits going to Charles Dance as William Randolph Hearst and Lily Collins as Manky's English secretary Rita Alexander. A quote attributed to Wells himself, almost certainly fallaciously so, but appropriate here, comes to mind. To wit, now we sit through Shakespeare in order to recognise the quotations. A lot of Mank makes me feel similarly, though it's portrayal of Golden Age Hollywood and famous names, with so many people of that era cameoing either in character or name alone that it feels like film fan bingo. David O. Selznick, Joe Mankiewicz, Joseph von Sternberg, Greta Garbo, John Houseman, House. Even when it's not portraying it in a negative light, there's still nothing Hollywood likes more than Hollywood. The biggest problem I have with Mank is that Herman Mankiewicz, at least as portrayed in Mank, isn't very interesting. And if I'm going to watch a film about the making of Citizen Kane, I'd far, far rather it be about Orson Welles, who is incredibly interesting. John Houseman said of Mankiewicz, he was one of the most intelligent, informed, witty, humane and charming men I've ever known. And there are only ever glimpses of that here. At least for the first half of the film, Mank is barely even a character, serving more as well a guide through a few important points. I originally mistyped this as pints, though that seems fitting given the character's principal interest in the history of Hollywood and of California politics. I have no issue with Gary Oldman's performance, but he's not really given a great deal to work with, and more than anything that's frustrating. Talking of performance, very dodgy accent aside, I also have no problem with Charles Dance's Hearst. What I do have a problem with is that Hearst, given that he's the protagonist of the exceedingly famous Romana Clef that is Citizen Kane, needs to be painted as the villain, and he really isn't. This may seem odd, given that when Fincher and Dance worked together in Alien 3, Dance was sort of a good guy. But I feel that the director is relying on a sense of villainy coming simply from the casting of Charles Dance. Charles Dance, ergo villain. And Charles Dance does play a stonking villain, don't get me wrong. Just not here, where the true villain and principal target of Mankiewicz's antipathy is clearly Louis B. Mayer. It all feels a bit misdirected. Mank is well made, it looks good. There are no bad points about Mank per se, though I don't love the screenplay style, typewritten location text, mostly due to inconsistency, nor the boomy 1930s movie sound, which plays to me as artifice, not authenticity. Though, to be fair, I stopped noticing it after a short while. It's just that it's not that interesting. It's fine, nothing more, and certainly isn't troubling the top of the list of David Fincher's work for me. Still worth seeing, though.
I offer two viewpoints on this, one from a day when I couldn't be bothered and one from a day when I could. First, basically boiling down to, this is all just way too much of an affectation for me. At that point, I kind of realised I might not be giving it a fair shake, so I stopped after about 10 minutes and came back the next day, at which point I actually quite enjoyed it. I find Mank to be, the character himself, to be quite entertaining. I found him quite funny. That's pretty much all he's got going for him, is the kind of quips and one-liners, and it was enough to kind of drive the pace of the film through. It doesn't keep running around. Obviously, you don't want to come into this thinking it's anything close to a documentary. It's almost all pretty much made from whole cloth. I think there was a film called Citizen Kane. Everything else I would not be taking on as any kind of factual basis, but it's enjoyable enough. I agree, I suppose, ultimately where you're coming from, Drew. It is not top-tier Fincher. It is ultimately just a kind of film where it's not exactly showing off, if you know what I mean, but there's no real reason to make this film. And certainly to make this film the way this film has been made, it's not quite just sort of him entertaining himself, because I think ultimately it's an enjoyable enough film. But I don't think the stylistic way it's been chosen, they've chosen to make it, really enhances it.
No, it really, as I said, it really felt to me like artifice. It didn't add anything. It's like, it's a period piece. We'll get that from the cars and even the way people speak and the clothes and things. You don't have to like make it sound like a 1930s film. It's kind of seemed too much.
And I don't necessarily think you shouldn't do it this way. It's an interesting experiment, but there's been kind of vaguely similar experiments done in the past, where like more interesting ones. Like was it Far From Heaven, the kind of one that's a bit more. Might be getting the name wrong there, but it was a gay love story.
Julia Modlebowski. Dennis Quaid, the Modlebowski film. That's Far From Heaven. Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah,
Todd Haynes' film.
Yeah, where they're trying to make sort of essentially a kind of LGBT love story in the style of something from where that could not have been made just due to the social preferences time. That's a kind of interesting experiment that kind of fuses the kind of style, but it has something more to say rather than just simply being a story in that time told in this sort of vaguely contemporary style.
Julianne Moore.
That's
sorry.
Yeah.
I would have annoyed me if I not got that out. Sorry.
So Mank's an interesting stylistic experiment. I certainly don't regret watching it. I actually enjoyed it a fair bit, but I have qualms about it. But I certainly, as I said, in certain moods, those qualms could overwhelm the quality of the rest of it. But yeah.
I found it solidly entertaining, but I got to the end and I was like, oh, was that it? I did find that Mank was reasonably funny and I liked his quips, but you kind of expect that from a writer. But you're right, it's all he's got going for him. It's I just found the character so unsatisfying to follow along. He's not really a character in his own life story for a lot of it. It's just, I said, it really just felt like he was a guide. It's like, right, he's your way into this part of the world at this point, and here's what's going on at Hearst's estate that becomes Xanadu and Citizen Kane. Without there being much to kind of hook onto in him himself.
I'm one of those savages who hasn't watched Citizen Kane, and that's one of the reasons I haven't watched Mank yet, is because I kind of want to watch that first for a bit of context in terms of cinema history.
Yes, I would say it's almost essential viewing.
Yeah,
before
I think
That's one
We'd be
reason.
foolish to not do it, to be honest.
Yeah. The other reason would be the aesthetic choice, which is not something that I think doesn't have its place, and it's not something that I necessarily disagree with, but it just strikes me as unusually trite for someone like David Fincher to adopt this kind of presentational affectation for... Is there a narrative justification for the decision to shoot in? Because it's even like a mono sound mix and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, the sound's horrible. It's got this horrible kind of boomy quality, and it's the sound more than anything that was bothering me. I stopped thinking about it after a while, but it's, as soon as that kind of 1930s kind of sound mix came, I was, oh, no, I do not like this, go away, this is bad.
Yeah. It's the really sort of offensive glamour glow thing going on as well. When I watched the trailer for it, that I just found aesthetically, I was like, oh no. And it's not that there's not a place for that. I appreciated it to a certain extent in, what was the Soderbergh film, The Good German? I know that gets pilloried, but I thought that was interesting at the time. But like I say, it just strikes me as unusually crass for someone of Fincher's capability to want to employ that as a visual method in something which is clearly a bit of a passion project, because it's his dad's screenplay, isn't it? Yeah. His dad has since passed away, but
Scott was kind of wondering why he chose to make this, and I just wonder if it's because it was his dad's screenplay.
I think he's made a commitment to his dad, certainly, that he would make that screenplay, and that's
maybe not
that's
done
why.
this without that.
Yeah.
So not knowing the man, I don't know, but that would be my guess.
And that's not legit, because and there's no reason why I wouldn't expect Fincher to want to take on this material. It's just purely from an aesthetic point of view. I know this will sound really weird and really sort of superficial, but I'm really going to need to be in the mood to watch Mank. So yes, there you go. Again, I haven't watched it, don't have an opinion, but there it is anyway.
There's your opinion, nevertheless. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Don't say I don't do anything for you, listeners. Cool.